Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zachary Rosenthal. I'm joined here by Steve Heinen and Eddie Martinez, and we're excited today to present Fleet Management for Owners and Managers. So this is a continuation of our Emerging Trends webinar series, and today we're going to be getting onto a very important topic of fleet management. So if you are a company that has this exposure, as you probably know, it's very challenging to manage, and there's a lot of costs involved to it, and it's really important to have a strong program. And what we're going to do today is we're going to be applying our P4 process to fleet management. So if we take a look at our history of where we've been through our trainings, it's been a couple months now. We started back in August with the foundation of people risk management, which is leadership. Then we continued on to P1 pre-hire. We then talked about post-offer, prevention. We finished up with post-claim. And now what we're doing is we're taking it to the next level and specifically talking about auto and fleets and how to apply these concepts. So Steve's going to run the show here. He's our guru on fleet management, and I'm going to pass it over to him now to get us started.
Perfect. Thank you, Zach. And I think if anything, if you've been with me on all these seminars, I do hear y'all being said in Miami more in the last 6 months. So maybe that's because you guys are spreading the word. And happy to have Robert here. He's up Palm Coast, which is really just South Georgia. So they say y'all up there around Jacksonville. But let me just give you kind of a quick history of P4 if you haven't been with us. And Zach just gave the outline. But about 26 years ago, I got tasked in Georgia to start a leadership program for workers' comp. And so we started looking at workers' comp. And at that time, most of us put all our effort in that fourth P post-claim. Like, what do we do to manage a claim? And I assembled some of the largest employers in Georgia. And we start our 27th year with this program, January 1st. But we started looking at the claims, and I had companies like Delta and Home Depot and big, large companies, Georgia Power. And what I learned was these big, super big companies, the attention they spent pre-claim. And so I adopted that and really came up with these 4 Ps. And what I'll tell you is for the first probably 15 years, P4 was just a work comp process. And then about 2015, I had a client say, well, why can't we adopt these principles to our fleet management? So in 15 was fleet, and then later on we added cyber and employment practice, which we're going to talk about in our next webinar. What I want to tell you is, if you're attending this, if you came through the workshop for P4 on work comp, the framework is going to be the same. So once you build a framework for workers' comp, the pre-hire, post-offer, prevention, post-claim, we're able to bolt in these best practices for these other lines of coverage. So that's what we're going to do today on the fleet. I'm going to start kind of giving you an analogy. You guys know I come from the country in North Georgia. We talk a lot about analogies and stories, but I want you guys, if you're in charge of fleet for your company, and if you're older, you've probably have had kids that have turned 16. And I want you to think about the risk management process you have, or maybe you're younger and you haven't had your license. You know, we all remember that magic day when we turned 16, what it was like when we finally got our freedom. That's what the driver's license represented to most 16-year-olds. But think about the discipline. You get 15, you get this thing called a learner's permit. You're not allowed to drive by yourself. You've got to be with a family member. You may go through student driving. There is discipline in place before you get your license. And then when you turn 16 and you go take a driver's test and you get that license, well, the risk management doesn't stop. It's ongoing. Imagine if you were like my parents. We didn't have technology back then. There was no cell phones. But it was like, hey, when you get there, we had to pick up a landline. Imagine even probably a rotary dial. I'm old. And we'd call our parents and let us know we got there. We'd call them when we were leaving. They put parameters. They put a geofence around us before there was ever any technology to geofence. And what I'm saying to you is, as a company, do we take the same approach in our company that we do with our personal lives and with our children? And when I say this, risk is much greater with a company that is in personal insurance. When you got a logo on the truck, the liability goes up. Attorneys are headhunting the companies, and you carry larger limits of insurance. So we should exercise a bigger degree of care. But what I find is most employers just phone it in when it comes to fleet safety. I want to give you one more example, and I'm going to talk about an incident that happened actually with one of my clients. And you know, it's the byproduct of having gray hair and been doing this for 42 years. You're involved in a lot of accidents. And you'll hear me say this probably a couple times in the webinar. Words don't create understanding, experience does. When you experience a horrific claim in your organization, it changes your policy, your procedures toward that one action. If you have an auto claim and there's a death involved, probably going to ramp up. You're going to have to because you're going to find buying coverage is very difficult. What I say is lean on the experience of your broker who's involved with hundreds of clients and lean on the experiences that the other don't have to only learn through the lagging indicator you have a claim change policy. But in this case, it was an HVAC contractor, very intentional. I would say if they went through our risk assessment, they would score very high. They had a training room in their facility. They brought all the employees in every month, face-to-face training. But what we found was they had a gap. They had an employee, they allowed some employees to take the vehicles home with them. And in the course of an employee taking a vehicle home with them, he was driving down the road, a 911 call came in. And the 911 call said there's this service van passing on a double line, something bad's going to happen. Well, minutes later, something bad did happen. Crossed the center line, killed an 18 or 19-year-old girl. And tragic. Happens every day. What made this event even more tragic was it was the owner's niece, the owner of the company's vehicle. And you can imagine, their own family member was killed by their vehicle. Tragic. What I would tell you is this: every accident, whether it's workers' comp, general liability, or a auto claim, every injury impacts a lot of people. So I just use this example to say, if you're a company that hasn't had a lot of claims, are you lucky? Or are you just waiting for this 911 call and find out you've got a lot of holes in your program? So hopefully we're going to give some actionable advice. And the last thing I'm going to do, and this was Eddie's example, I stole from him. I loved it. I used it in the work comp series about trust. And we talked about your trust when you get on an airplane with the pilot that they're doing everything wrong. You guys have also heard me talk about the 20-60-20 rule. And 20% of your employees are going to do right no matter what. 20 probably are never going to do right. 60% could go either way. As a broker, one of the questions I like to ask a prospect is, when you give the keys to an employee, every day when you flip them the keys, how much confidence do you have that they're going to put your company first? In other words, are you confident enough that you would just hand them a blank check? Because that's basically what you do every day. You send them out there and you say, man, we hope they don't have an accident. So what is your trust level? And if your trust level, like most employers, they would say, man, 20% of our employees are going to be great. 20% we probably need to get rid of. And what about the 60%? Are we pulling them over to the good side? And that's what some of the things we're going to talk about, just like we did in the work comp framework, we're going to apply it to fleet. Okay. Zach, do we have a polling question for this?
Yep, we got a polling question. Let me pull it up here.
While you put it up, I was going to tell you a story from this morning. I was at a company, one of our clients. They have about 90 drivers, 90 vehicles, and the CFO was there doing a speech on his company's logo and the importance of how many years he's been in business with that logo. And most clients don't see him cut the wood or prepare his product. They only see that logo on the road and the employee, the driver who represents the company. So it's very important. You guys that have large fleets or you have 5 vehicles in your fleet, is very important to make sure that your drivers know what to do to avoid an accident, and if they do have an accident, what to do in that form also. So we'll talk a little bit about that in our presentation.
All right, so here's the polling question. In a serious at-fault accident, who feels the biggest impact? Is it the company? Is it the driver, other drivers in the company, or just the other parties? So we'll give everyone another 30 seconds to answer. And I see many people are saying our company. Okay, just give another 5 seconds here. Last chance to put in your polling. All right, here we go. So there's our results. 68% said our company, 18% said the driver, 3% other drivers in the company, and 12% the other party. So Steve, what are your thoughts on that?
You know, I love polling questions because I always ask them where there's no right answer. What I would tell you is in a serious at-fault accident, the company certainly takes it on the chin because it's going to impact their loss history for 4 years. It's going to impact their safer score. The driver feels it. Certainly, if they're doing something illegal like texting and driving, we talk about in our defensive driving. We show a driver, company driver, driving down the road, texting his wife that he loves her, see you later, short text, doesn't see a construction site, bashes into a car, kills people. He's in prison for 20 years. So I would argue the company felt it was probably I'm sure it was a policy limit claim for the company. But that driver, forever, I mean, that husband is going to be gone for 20 years. The father is going to be incarcerated for at least 20 years. I would argue that probably the driver felt it more than the company. The problem in accidents a lot of times is the driver can have the accident. You can try to take consequences against the driver. They just quit and they get hired by someone else, and you get stuck with the collateral damage of that claim. I could go either way on those. Then we talk about other drivers in the company. Certainly it impacts them. If you guys see a 30 or 40% increase in your auto, it impacts raises and bonuses. If you're having constant accidents, you get on DOT's radar, you're more likely to have the good drivers are more likely to be pulled over. So certainly it affects the other drivers, but also the other party. Sometimes when we talk about insurance, we forget about the other party, that third party of our truck, that 911 call where our van killed the owner's niece and the damage we do. And so sometimes when we do driver training, we like to talk about these four things. We like to ask the driver, who does it impact? Get them to think about it. It's more than just them. It impacts the company. It impacts the other drivers sitting in the training room. Eddie did training this morning for driver training, and certainly the impact. And I asked this question. It's not a polling question, but we talk about in workers' comp, the goal is to send people home with all 10 fingers and all 10 toes. Fair question to ask your drivers when you're doing driver training is a simple question. When your family is out on the road, do you hope the other drivers are safe drivers? I think the answer is yes. So as a professional driver, you owe the other families the same courtesy you want the other drivers showing your family. So good polling question, Zach. Thank you for sharing those results. It's not surprising that most folks said the company, but I would argue it impacts the other three as well. All right, so we talk about P4, and again, reminding you the construct pre-hire, post-offer prevention, and post-claim. Let's break this down and what it means for fleet. So with fleet, first thing we want to do is we want to establish a hiring criteria. Part of our driver program, and you can get this from Eddie or David or any of the producers at EIG, is a driver acceptability matrix. It's red light, green light, yellow light. If you got a red light, you shouldn't try to get exceptions made, because if that person is in an accident, you're just going to stack zeros on the end of the claim file with the plaintiff attorney. If it's yellow, maybe put them in some kind of a short list that you're going to check their MVR. You're going to put them through some remediation training. And certainly if they're green, it's okay. Hire them. But what about the background checks? Now, I think everybody on this call does an MVR. We're a big fan of continuous MVR monitoring. Why? Even if you have a policy in your driver program, which most companies do, to say you've got to self-report any incident that happens outside of work. So you're going to know about the incident, hopefully, that happened inside of work. But what about the incidents that happen outside of work? And so they get a DUI or they get a reckless driving or they get some, going 35 miles over the speed limit. It might not be flagged till you pull their MVR next year. Meanwhile, they're in a company truck next week and they got a DUI pending and they have an accident in your truck. Liability goes through the roof. So great idea to go to continuous MVR monitoring. Again, our guys and gals can certainly give you resources to do that. Just a consideration for you. Implementing behavioral interviews. I know this sounds wacky, but this is a very effective way to make sure you get good drivers. We're going to talk about it on the next slide, and I'm going to give you some examples. And then I think it's important with every employee, whether it's workers' comp, OSHA, or drivers, make sure you set a clear expectation. Eddie made a great example. You got that logo on the truck. You, as a driver for a company, particularly in a company where you have the logo on the truck, you're in customer service. Even if you're a driver, their impression about your company is going to be directly tied to that driver behavior. So if you're, aggressively driving, road rage, cutting people off, it's going to give a bad impression to the public about your company. Again, when a driver comes into your company, they bring whatever baggage they've had at previous companies, good or bad, they bring that to your company day one. So they came from a very, very safe company, they bring that. If they come from a company that didn't care, they didn't check their telematics, use their telematics properly, that's what they bring into your company. You have an opportunity, really only one, to set the clear expectation of what it's like to work for your company. And you need to do it day one. That's part of establishing the foundation. All right, let's talk about some behavioral interview questions. I'm not telling you got to put a Harvard MBA to get a driver. It's hard to find drivers, but you can ask questions about their driving behavior. For example, ask them I just gave three. We've got a whole behavioral checklist we can give you, sample questions. But asking them, hey, you've got an emergency. Your daughter-in-law is getting ready to have the baby, and you're waiting on the call, and you're driving down the road, and you get a text. Your text bings. What do you do? Do you take the text? Do you pull over? What do you do? And what you're looking for is an honest answer. If we were doing this live and I asked everybody to raise their hand, Zach, I'll ask you and Eddie, raise your hand. Have you ever texted and drive? And these are two safety-minded people. Eddie's been in safety his whole career. We do it. The way I bet you, and Eddie is a producer. He's a broker in our firm. He moved through risk management and is a producer, but he was out doing driver training. I bet when he goes out and does driver training, probably reminds him when he's teaching it to other people, I got to practice what I preach, right, Eddie?
Yep. Yep.
It's tough, and we're going to talk about micro learning and how you reinforce that in a little bit. But asking them about their behavior, if they tell you, I've never texted and drive, they're probably not being truthful with you. That might be a red flag. Describe a near miss. Listen, I live near Atlanta. Atlanta's traffic's bad, but Miami traffic is horrible. People are crazy in Miami. So I'd say virtually everybody that drives in Miami is probably in a near miss every day when they go to work. But asking them, describe a near miss you've been in. What did you do? What factors contributed to it? Could you have done better to avoid it? And talking about pre-trip inspections. Again, hey, The last company you worked at, did they do pre and post trip inspections? Yeah. Were they really detailed on it? Did they follow up on it, or did you guys just pencil whip it? Was it just a form you filled out? What was the culture like in the company you came from? That's a great interview question. If they say, "No, man, we were great. We had to do it on an app. They checked us. If we pencil whipped it, we got written up." That's good to know because when they come into your company, you're not going to have to sell them on the why. Okay. You could ask questions about the telematics. Like, how did your company use telematics in your previous company? Did they use them or did they just have the cameras? Did they allow you to block the cameras? What was the culture like? Important to know because if you're a company that is going to put in practice some of the things we're talking about, you're better off having a driver that's acclimated with these things coming in because they expect it versus a driver that came from a company that was just a loose cannon. So really good, I think, to ask questions. Doesn't mean you're not going to hire the person. It might just give you an idea of what you're in for to train them up on your risk management plan. Make sense, Eddie? Zach, what do you think?
Yeah, and I think that these are all great and summary filters, right? Before you give somebody the keys to your company, as you said before, you don't want to just put them behind the wheel day one. We have a big pumping contractor down here in South Florida. They've got 90 trucks. Originally, when we started working with them, they really didn't have a true onboarding for their drivers. So they were just getting their drivers behind the wheel and they were having accidents because they just didn't know who they were putting behind the wheel. They were good pump operators, but not the best drivers. So it's always important to test your drivers and know exactly who you're giving the keys to.
Yep. Yeah, we're going to talk about that once you put them on. We haven't hired them yet, but that's all good points. But think about it. If you ask them a question like, hey, did they use telematics? Did they have uh, forward and cab facing cameras? Yeah, they did. What do you think about the cab facing cameras? Like, what do you think about having a camera on you while you're driving? Do you think it's a good idea or a bad idea? And ask them for their feedback. It's going to probably give you some insights of what person you're going to put behind the wheel.
Now, I do get this question a lot, Steve, and I'm sure somebody's going to ask it. Hey, what about if I just need drivers? Like I need drivers, they're so hard to find,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I need and I need it, I need drivers.
I think everybody. I mean, when we talk about putting up a firewall to a bad employee, I'm not saying you don't hire people, but when you ask the questions, at least you know what you're dealing with when you onboard them. You know how resistant they're going to be. I'm not saying you use the questions as a hire or not hire. I'm saying ask the questions. And if you find they're highly resistant to enough questions, you're probably better off passing because you need a driver, but you put them behind the wheel. They don't follow any safety rules. They block the camera. And 3 weeks in, they have a $3 million auto claim. You fire them, they're going to go get a job somewhere else. You're stuck with that claim. And so what we have to do is I'm not saying everybody's going to be perfect. But we talked about this 20-60-20 rule. 20 are going to be great no matter what. 20 are going to stink no matter what. 60 could go either way. Hire the people in the top 20 and maybe the 60. If you find out they're in that bottom 20, I promise you, no matter how badly you need a driver, the juice won't be worth the squeeze. So, all right, we're now at a point where we've gone through our application, we've asked questions, we've done our background, and we're going to bring them on board. Okay. First thing we got to do is, of course, if we're DOT, we got to run them through all the DOT stuff. We want to have a written policy. This is crazy. I'm not a real policy guy because policies that sit on the shelf aren't worth the paper they're written on. Okay. But having a short policy is really, really important. Let me back up a second. I want you to think about this P4, and we're going to talk about it in a minute. But as we go through these, when you have a claim, particularly a bigger claim where there's a plaintiff attorney involved, they're going to attack you in all four boxes. They're going to attack you on your hiring practices, on your onboarding practice, certainly your prevention, and then they're going to tear you apart once you have a claim. So What I want you to think about is when we go through these, if you don't have these things in place, these are the lines of attack for an attorney. But hopefully, it's also you want to do them because it's going to prevent injuries if we put these things in place. So having a written policy is important, and having a policy that you follow is even more important. So less policy, more actionable. Don't have 50 pages if you only follow 2 pages. Just have 2 pages, but have it. Table stakes are you got to at least have, personal use. You got to have distracted driving policy. You got to have wear your seatbelt policy. Uh,
Telematics policy in case you have cameras.
and the telematics policy. Thank you. If you have it. And I see a lot of times we have the first three, but then you put in telematics, in the last 3 or 4 years, and your fleet policy is 15 years old. It probably doesn't have anything about telematics in it. So that's a great point, Eddie, is pull your driver program out. If you don't have a telematics policy in your driver program, get it in there. We're going to talk in the next slide about vehicle technology. I gave the analogy the other day, and not jumping ahead to our cyber workshop, but I'm reminded about 10 years ago in cyber coverage, they suggested dual authentication and certain things in your firewall and certain things. Hey, we recommend these things for you to get cyber coverage. Well, 5 years ago, the dual authentication became table stakes. Now, if you don't have those things in place, you can't even buy cyber coverage. Like you can't even buy it at any cost. And so what's happened is they've just gotten the claims have gotten so big and the frequency has spiked up so much that they're now saying you got to have these things. This is also happening in fleet. And so one of the things we do a really good job of is, we help our clients make sure they get the right telematics. There's a lot of things you can do with your telematics. So it's not just, hey, you plug this thing in and you get some data. There's so many things you can do with that information. I'm going to talk about it in the next slide. But if you haven't invested in the right system, don't go by the best software salesperson that calls on you, because that's what they are. And we see a lot of companies, they get with the wrong platform and they're spending a lot of money and they get tied into a ridiculously long contract. So, ask your broker for advice on what is the best system and how's it going to help me, mitigate risk and reduce my insurance costs. So we'll talk about that. And then what Eddie was talking about earlier was that practical verification. Don't just flip the keys to your drivers. If you're obviously driving a bigger truck, have a ride along. If it's a smaller truck, maybe have the person go with a manager to job sites for a couple of days and let the employee drive. If they're going to be driving a pickup truck, let them drive in traffic a couple of days. Make observations. Are they a good driver? Don't just give them the keys and say good luck. Okay, now when we go through this and we talk about continuous improvement, by the way, all these things we're talking about, P1 all the way through P4, make sure you're communicating these things if you're doing them to your broker so they can communicate these things to your insurance carrier. So the first thing we talk about is ongoing driver training. We're a big believer in that. We think for heavy fleets, they should use micro-learning because they can't pull the employees off the road for lengthy periods of time. They're not working in a plant. It's not conducive to toolbox talks. If they come in and do leave every day from the warehouse, it's early. And it's hard to get everybody in there early enough before dispatch sends them out, do training. So micro-learning it's going to become in the next 5 years. I think most heavy fleet companies will have some sort of micro-learning in place. We've got some systems we use that we recommend. We've got folks in our office that create the training. So, again, it's just like picking your telematics. Pick a good learning management system to manage your training. We think the telematics and the cameras are great to data mine. Several of our clients give us administrative logins. I know Eddie's got several clients he does it on, where we can actually data mine the video and good things, good events and bad events. and put those in little micro learning lessons. So, this is what we call leading indicators. When you do something and you create training after an accident, it's a lagging indicator. When you're using things like near misses, and that you get a lot of those in the telematics, those are called leading indicators. And as a company, from a safety standpoint, if you can build your company around leading indicators versus waiting until something happens and you whack that mole, and you wait for something to happen and you whack that mole, you're going to see a significant reduction in your cost. Okay, and then driver engagement, again, your telematics and your micro learning platform can feed right into a driver engagement program where you can give them bonuses based not only on their driver behavior, but also their completion of training. You can gamify the training, and you can also tie it into preventative maintenance. Are they doing uh, are they doing a thorough pre and post trip inspection? Because ultimately, that has a big impact, particularly if you're DOT. You want to see that stuff not just being pencil whipped. So you can buy a framework that can tie all these together in one platform. So if you've got a good telematics, you can actually link your micro learning platform through an open API. Some telematics companies have training inside, but let's say you got a big warehouse and you've got 50 trucks and 50 drivers and 500 people in a warehouse. The warehouse folks are going to still need the training. So we're really good at helping clients map out what is a good platform, and every company is just a little bit different. But having a process where you recognize that you've got to work on continuous improvement. And I'm taking you back to the car key example. You don't just flip the keys to them and say, good luck. Like with our 16-year-old, we have a continuous improvement process. I would argue, my two boys are 34 and 28. I still have them check in. When they come up and see us, when they go home, we're like, text us as soon as you get home. If they go on a long trip, they're going on vacation in Florida from Georgia, we say, when you get there, let us know. We have a continuous improvement process in place that'll never stop. It's called parenting. So, just make sure if you have a program and you're intentional on your hiring and you do a good job on the post offer, make sure that you keep the message in front of them on a consistent basis. Because ultimately, you hope you hire safe drivers that are good drivers, but ultimately what it comes down to is just reminding them on regular events. I would tell you, Eddie, probably because he does probably more defensive driving than anyone in our office for his clients, he probably gets the most reminders. That's like micro learning. He's training other people. Probably when he leaves, he's like, crap, I can't, I can't take that text message. So the more you put information in front of your employees, the more likely it is to attach them and think about what they're doing instead of just giving them a policy. And once a month, you put them through a 20-minute long, a boring video. Why not send them a message every week that's 2 minutes, reminding them, hey, this is why we need to drive safely. So that's just, I get kind of passionate about that because you can do it better, faster, cheaper. Technology allows you to push out training better, faster, cheaper now. Take advantage of it. All right. We're going to talk about telematics. I think Eddie could probably do a whole hour, and some of the other people in our firm can do a whole hour just on telematics. But one thing I'll tell you is it provides documentation, good or bad. And if you got telematics and you're not using it, it's documentation for the plaintiff attorney.
Hey, Steve, I wanted to talk a little bit about that here. When we talk about telematics, obviously it's the cameras, it's the preventive maintenance, it's the speed, the harsh brakes, everything put together gives you a driver score. Yesterday, I had a meeting with somebody that's on this webinar, Alejandro Vega, and he's a business owner, and he was super proud of showing me that he had all that information on his cell phone through an app, and he's constantly monitoring it. So one thing is having the information, and the other thing is using it properly. And what I told him, I asked him, I said, do you have the inside camera, the camera for the cab? Because there's a lot of businesses that don't have the inside camera. And he says, absolutely. Why wouldn't I not have the inside camera? That gives you so much more data.
Yeah, it's a great point, but I will tell you this: if you're a company, like he gets it, it's easy. If you're a company that doesn't have the inside facing cameras, or you have them, but your drivers are blocking them, right? They just put something up in front of it. You can't just go say we're not. We could give you a great business case on the why you need to get those cameras unblocked. But it's got to be culturally an evolution for your drivers. They got to understand why it's so important. So a lot of times when we take on a new client or even an existing client that's upgrading their telematics, we have to go do a series of trainings or help the client do trainings on explaining the why versus this is our policy. Because again, to Eddie's point, you got so many companies like we don't want to change because they feel like drivers own the company. Like if we ramp down on them, they're going to leave. I'll tell you what you're going to find is that market is shrinking of places they can go that doesn't have a good risk management. And it's called hard market for auto, hard market for umbrella. And so what's happening is more and more companies are being forced to do that. And so you want drivers that are doing it because they understand it. And sometimes you got to explain it to them. Remember when we started the whole series way back, gosh, Zach, it seems like a year ago when we started this thing.
Yeah, I can't believe it was back in the summer.
Yeah, and we started with leadership, and we talk about supervisor leadership, and every company wants their supervisors to step up and be better leaders, but you have to train them how to be better leaders. I think every driver understands the importance of safety, whether they admit it or not. Every driver will admit that they want the other vehicles on the road being safe when their family, when their children are out on the road. And so I think it's easy to attach a message, but sometimes we got to train them on the why behind what we're doing versus just telling them. And then, for that business owner has it on his phone. I do think people are competitive. You do have the way to motivate them with these results. And if you've got a consistently high score and your scores for your drivers are in the 90s, once you do that and start showing everybody the scores, maybe the first couple months while you're rolling it out, let everybody kind of catch up and understand it. They're not going to want to be that one in the 60s. I mean, they might not keep their job, but also if you're having, I know some companies at their dispatch, they have a big TV monitor and it just scrolls the driver scores. Everybody sees. And I've been there at the beginning of the shift doing training, and you can see everybody checks it when they go in. It's
We've
kind of
helped
like,
clients, Steve, put together incentive programs for the drivers based on their driver scores to reward the good drivers and recognize them.
yeah, and it's got to be done in a very thoughtful way because you don't want a driver that right out of the gate has driver behavior the first day of the month that disqualifies them, and then they go, screw this. So there's a lot of thought, and Eddie's done a good job with some clients on it, but you got to put a lot of thought into your incentive programs. Because the thing about an incentive program is somebody, that top 20%, they're going to do it right no matter what. An incentive is not going to motivate them one way or the other. They're already positive motivated. If they're in the bottom 20%, it probably doesn't even impact them. It does get those 60% up. But I do think this, if they're driving safely, they're helping your company be more profitable. If you're more profitable, that's almost like you're giving them profit sharing. Hey, man, if we make more money, we're going to make more money if we have a month with no accidents. So really tying these three things together in the telematics is really important. And then once you do these things, I think this is one of the things, not plugging EIG that we do really well is we tell a really good story to the underwriters. And I say this, if you guys have been if you're a prospect of EIG, and yeah, I've been on a call with you, you hear me say this, but how does an underwriter evaluate what to price you? They do it based on a flat piece of paper. It's your vehicle schedule and your loss runs. And that's not really an indication of who you are. These things are an indication of who you are and how safe you are. So if you're doing these things well, make sure your underwriter is putting that in your submission. Okay, we're finally to P4, and this is taking aim. Same thing we talked about in workers' comp. Accident happens, you investigate it, and then you manage it. Okay, accident happens, you investigate it, and you manage it. Now, I want to tell you guys, I'm going to now tell you something you don't want to hear. Most people pay a ginormous amount of money for their auto insurance. And they say, when we have a claim, I mean, there's an expectation. I mean, I pay a lot of money for my car. There's an expectation when something goes wrong, I take it to the shop, they fix it. I'm not going to fix it. But in our business, you guys have to take the first step in any claim. If you expect your agency or your insurance carrier to be the first level of communication, you're going to be paying too much for that claim, particularly in auto. So, what Eddie was doing this morning was he was doing training on the accident kit. Because certainly when the accident happens, that investigation is done by your driver. I could give you so many examples. 3 years ago, I had a claim where we, on a rural road, big truck, hit a driver who just slammed on their brakes in the middle of a two-lane highway, 55 mile an hour, little two-lane highway, country road. We hit the car so hard that it hit the culvert and went flying in the air, went out of view of our cameras, came back in view, hit an oak tree. I don't know, 16 or 18 feet in the air is how high it went in the air. This little kid it flung it like a frisbee. I've never seen anything like it before. It was horrific to watch. I mean, imagine seeing the video and it was like the Wizard of Oz. It went out and then it came crashing against a tree, crashing to the ground. Needless to say, the Kia was just this little crumpled ball of metal. We had just done accident investigation training the day before for this client and talked about observational awareness. So the accident happened, but the observational awareness after the accident, okay? What information that driver got. Now, I got to tell you, this claim was a heavy umbrella claim. I was able to settle it. I went and actually met with the person we hit, settled it for $35,000 and got a full release. And the reason was the driver got some compelling information. I'll tell you what it is since we're almost done with the webinar. So what happened was there was a car in front of the car we hit. It stopped. It overshot the driveway. Both cars were going to the same place. It overshot the driveway, slammed on its brakes. Next car slammed on their brakes. Our driver, probably following too close, saw him stop, couldn't stop in time, was going to go into the other lane, but there was an oncoming car and just had to hit the person. And they went flying off the road. And what happened next was the other driver backed up, went in the driveway, and the people from this house ran out and picked up a big duffel bag from the first car. And then they went into the back of the car that got smashed. Somehow they were able to go through a window and they got the duffel bag out of that car. No one ever checked on the girl driving the car. And the car was just crumpled like this. I mean, it was just a crumpled mess. The other car took off. The people ran in the house, locked the door. State Patrol comes. All this on video. And I mean, but the stuff that happened was outside our cameras. It was videoed by the driver. Now, again, we hit the person. It was our fault. But we used that information because obviously there was something nefarious going on. We used that information, and this person did not want to go to court. And so we used that information. I went by the junkyard and looked in her car and saw the payday loans. And not to take advantage of her, but she had, and we had evidence of it. The State Patrol did not even write us up for a ticket. She had her taillights out. So the reason, if you rewind the tape and really look at what happened in the accident, our driver could have reacted sooner, but he saw her, but he never really, it took him a second to click that she just stopped in the middle of the road because she had no brake lights. So what I'm telling you is a lot of times in the accident, you've got to get that information. So let's say the accident happens. We're going to talk about your action plan of what you do next and how you manage it. Before I do that, I want to remind you, I joked and said this was Eddie back in his younger days when he had his mullet, and he decided that it wasn't, but he went by the name Nasty Eddie, is what he told me, Nasty Eddie. And Could you just imagine Eddie? He's such a good-looking guy. Could you imagine such a clean-cut guy like Eddie having a mullet? Uh, I'm getting you a mullet when I come down to Miami next month, Eddie. That's good. We're
I
gonna
can use it for Halloween.
no, we're gonna use it when we go out to dinner. It's gonna be great fun. But I want you to think about what they do when you have a claim. Again, I said this earlier. You're under attack, and they're attacking you in all four Ps. So we've talked about P1, P2, and P3. What we ask our clients to do is let's rely on what you do on P1, P2, and P3, and then when the accident happens, um, we're going to spring to action. So let's talk about what you do. Let's talk about that claims action plan. Day one. What we want you to do is have an immediate response. Okay. First of all, your drivers better call you immediately, someone in the company immediately. Like they need to do that immediately. Document everything at the scene. It's a serious at-fault accident. We may want to get an a reconstruction company out. We're not going to take the police officer's word for what happened. We may want to get some forensic people out. But you've got a narrow window to get that done. So you got to look at what happened. And again, we only get one chance, one, to document the scene, one chance. And a lot of times, I was reading, we don't have confirmation. One of our carriers sends out a bulletin, and it sounds like one of our accounts we just picked up. We picked up this account, had a big auto claim outstanding. And it was a big auto claim that was really a nothing claim that turned into a big auto claim. And what happened was this person, we were in traffic, hit her going about 2 miles an hour, but she's permanently disabled. And this is before we were even the broker, so we can't take credit for this, but the driver videoed everything. And the video of this person was so compelling. And so there was this huge demand that came out. The one I saw in the bulletin was a $3 million demand. Um, we it's incredulous to me that the insurance carrier never asked the employer for this video, and the employer never thought to send this video. It was so compelling what happened after the accident. And without getting in all the details for time's sake, they were getting ready to go to mediation. And that claim would have settled for many hundreds of thousands of dollars, no doubt. And we said, look, you need to make a $15,000 offer to get rid of this thing. And the claims adjuster said, well, they're not going to take that. And I said, make it, because if you make the offer, it'll go in, and they don't take it, it'll go into litigation. We can do discovery. I said, I'll bet you a steak dinner that this person has done this multiple times before, but we can't get that information. You're at such a disadvantage on an auto claim. Think about it for a second. If it's a workers' comp, we'd send them to the workers' comp doctor. We get the notes, they're going to physicians or now Concentra. And Zach, in his prior life was our coordinator. We could get the notes. We could find out what's going on. When it's an auto claim and we hit them, they get an attorney, they go away for about 8 months. We can't compel anything until it goes into litigation. We can't get any medical record. We can't get anything from the other party until they file suit. And so what happens is we do nothing. And if you guys know this, if you're an employer, you call your insurance company and say, well, there's nothing we can do. There's a lot you can do, and you better do it quickly. One, get documentation at the scene. Two, in an incident like I just described, where we had great documentation to show that this other party was a fraudster. I mean, you could tell. She called for an ambulance. They put a neck brace on her. She's in the gurney, laying there. I think the police were so taken aback by her actions, they were searching her car, I think hoping to find drugs in her car, because they felt sorry for our client. And anyway, and our client videoed it all. And he was standing behind her so she didn't see him. And she's sitting up looking to see what they're looking for in her car. And then as soon as they turn around and look at her, she's back on the thing and she's really in pain. That tells us she's manifesting these symptoms. She's not hurt. We knew we were going to get a representation letter next day. So we get that documentation. What do we do next? Well, we're now day 2 through 7. First, we want to send the detailed records to the carrier, everything we have. And that's where this client, they weren't our client at the time, they were a prospect. They didn't do that. Um, if it's minor damage, either our vehicle, if it's our vehicle, go ahead and get it to the repair shop. Report the claim to your carrier. Get it to the repair shop. Get repairs started. You're out of use of that vehicle, um, which, by the way, you can be paid for, but it's still an inconvenience for you. Don't wait on the appraiser to come out there. Get it to the shop where you want it fixed. What about if you hit someone else that's minor damage? Go ahead and pay for the repairs. We've got a signed release. Get a signed release. If there's no bodily injury, tell them we'll take care of it if we're at fault, and get it to a good body shop and pay for it. If someone is injured, if they're really injured, of course we got concerns. But in the case I gave you, we didn't feel like she was injured. Why don't you order surveillance? Tell your auto carrier we want to surveil her. Wait a few days because maybe she is a little bumped up. Probably not in this case, but wait 3 or 4 days. If she's out playing with Zach on the pickleball court, the accident happened on Wednesday, and she's with Zach on a Saturday playing pickleball. Uh, let's get that documentation because 6, 9 months down the road, she's going to be permanently disabled. She's going to be on crutches. And now we've got this demand for $1 million. She's now on notice. Her attorney's telling her, hey, as soon as we litigate on this thing and we give her a demand of $1 million, they're going to be watching you. But nobody thinks about it a week after the accident. So she's got to live her life. And if she's not hurt, she's going to go do the same activities, do a social media canvas. Don't you do it, the client. Have your insurance company, have a surveillance company do it. Don't you start friending people, claimants on Facebook. That's going to get you in trouble or worse. Let your insurance company do it. It's really inexpensive to do a social media canvas. Now, the insurance carrier won't do it. They'll farm it out to their third party. And we've got a really good investigation company we work with, and they work with most of the carriers. So I will tell you again, I'm kind of going back to workers' comp. We talked about in workers' comp, we like to pick the defense attorney for you versus the insurance carrier picking it. And there's a reason why. We also like to pick vendors like the surveillance vendor. We like to pick good med clinics like the one Zach worked at. There's a reason why we want to pick the vendors. We've got a working relationship. We can expect better performance from them. So
I think, Steve, just not to interrupt you, but on day one, I would change that to hour one, like the first hour within the accident, to report the accident immediately. You have to set up your drivers to succeed and train them on immediate response because we're getting the benefit of this presentation, which is great. But the drivers, some drivers don't know what to do besides call the police and sit in their truck. Okay, so we have these accident kits that we share with our clients and prospects that we put in every vehicle inside the glove compartment, and it walks them through exactly what to do. Think about when you're in an accident or when your kids are in an accident, you get very nervous, right? When it happens and you're in the side of the road, there's a bunch of moving cars, a bunch of other, you can cause a second accident if you're not careful. So training your drivers on what to do immediately hour one instead of day one is extremely important. We had a client that had an accident and they didn't report it to the office. The driver didn't report it to the office till the end of the day. We lost several hours where we could have easily settled the claim or taken care of that other vehicle, and we couldn't because it was already almost 8 hours later.
yeah, that's a good point. I just had an idea, Zach, Eddie. Hold that accent form back up. He just distributed a big pile of these. Um, wouldn't it be cool if we had a little QR code on there and we had like a 20-second video reminder when they had an accident that they could scan their phone on it and it reminds them, hey, do these 3 things. Wouldn't that be wouldn't that be pretty cool use of technology? So Zach, put that in our technology to-do list
Yeah,
for
I'm writing it down.
2026. But here's what I'll tell you. Um, you know, most people don't know what to do. You might tell them what to do, but when you're in an accident, it's traumatic, and based on the seriousness of it, if you think it's a very minor you might even be more distracted. Imagine that driver that saw that person calling an ambulance on a Miami freeway, and all he did was the traffic was stopped, and she was in a blind spot, and he went over into her lane, and he scraped the side of her car. I mean, it was a minor, probably $2,000 or $3,000 claim that this person has immediately had to stop traffic, call an ambulance. Ambulance had to come pick her up, and imagine. So that was the one extreme, how frustrated the driver was. So this action plan, and then so you got the 2 through 7 day. I want to say this quickly because we're coming up to the edge of our time, and we got to spin the wheel. Zach's got to spin the wheel, but I want you to think about what we're trying to do is reinvent claims at EIG. We're trying to give tools to the clients to be better. We want to be helpful, but there's a lag. Even like if Eddie's your broker, and all you do when you have a claim is you call Eddie. Eddie, what should we do? We've got to put better information in our clients because the immediacy, not only the driver responding to you, but you respond to your insurance company, and getting boots on the ground and getting this thing handled quickly. That's the name of the game. All right, I think we're gonna just go through this slide now. I'm done. And so what I tell you is learning from incidents. And again, it's not just incidents you have in your company, but imagine we have hundreds and hundreds of clients, and it's sharing what happens with one experience at one company. We're trying to share that with everybody. And we're doing a webinar series next month. It's probably going to be more on, hey, learn from incidents. I think we should have a series on learn from past incidents because it's very expensive if you do it by lagging indicator on what happens in your company. So the best scenario is learn something that happened from another company, and then you're using it as a leading indicator. So again, we've got this whole ecosystem of how we try to help our clients learn from incidents. So we look at the past, present, and future. This is something you hear in every line. We look at your past claims. We want to see your accident reporting. We're looking at your telematics. How are you using them? Have you used them in the past? Where are you today? And how can we put this process in place? So that's it. Zach, we got right in under the wire. So I know you got some housekeeping you want to do.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, the next slide has our contact information. So, if you have any questions on developing a fleet plan and process, we're more than happy to assist. As Eddie was showing you, we have plenty of documentations and forms. So, if you're looking to enhance any of this, please reach out to us and we can certainly go over it with you.